Starting?
Get longer.
Oh, we're just starting. Yeah. Well, I guess we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Excited for the chance to answer questions and hopefully share some information about the airport master plan update. So I believe the protocol is people sign up to ask a question. We'll try to I'm not sure how many people we have online. We'll try to give folks enough time to ask their questions. And then we've got folks on Zoom as well. We'll go and make sure we capture questions from folks on Zoom. And just want to thank everybody in advance for we're all here to just share information and hear what you guys what your questions and concerns are. So we just hope people will be respectful and hopefully avoid talking about individual port staff and individual people or other individual commenters if possible. So with that, I think we can, why don't we introduce ourselves down the row here? We'll start with Sean.
All right. Hi, everybody. Sean Gilbertson, Director of Environmental Planning. And
I'm Alex Smith. I'm the Executive Director.
I'm Chris Pellany, the Airport Senior Manager.
Warren Hendrickson, Director of Operations for the port.
Okay, so do we have someone signed up to question favor?
We do. I didn't know if Chris wanted to open.
Oh, sorry. If you want, yeah.
Yeah.
Let Chris open up with just a little background.
Yeah, so we had a 30-day public comment period that we started in January and went through February 12th, I believe. And during that process and continuing after that process, we started realizing that there was a lot of misperceptions about what the master plan, the purpose of the master plan, what it entails, what its limitations are. And so we just thought it would be really helpful because I fielded a lot of phone calls from members of the community and so did other port staff that had some genuine concerns about just some what they thought were plans for the airport that aren't actually plans for the airport. And so some of you may have received a fact sheet that has about, I think there's 17 questions on it. There's copies in the back if you want to grab one. I did email it out to all the emails that we had from people that had provided comments from 2022 through 2025. And so it just addresses some of the issues. We know back in around 2019, there was a separate legislative directed committee called the Commercial Aviation Coordination Commission. And what even muddied the waters even more is that Mr. Warren Hendrickson here actually served on that separate from being the previous airport manager for the Olympia Airport. He also served on that. And I think there was some misunderstandings, I think, about whether or not the airport was trying to move towards being a SeaTac 2.0, as some community members have called it, or becoming a reliever airport for SeaTac. And we got some of that feedback from the community again recently over the last couple of months. And so, and some other topics that you can read about in this question and answer sheet. And so we realized it's worth to have an open public meeting like this where we can have people ask questions. And we'd like to have gotten these questions out earlier to people, but you can only go as fast as you become aware of the situation. And then of course, draft, detailed answers to be able to provide. And so to answer the SeaTac question, which is again in this sheet, and we can ask more questions about it, is emphatically no. Neither port leadership nor other leadership of the surrounding communities have any desire for our airport to become a SeaTac 2.0 or even a reliever airport for SeaTac. And so that was just some misunderstandings from I think some residual leftover concerns from 2019 when that Commercial Aviation Coordination Commission, which again was a state appointed group, was doing its work at the time. So anyways, that's just one example of some of the stuff that we heard. And again, if you want to pick up the Q&A sheet in the back on your way out tonight, please feel free. And then of course, all the questions this evening as well, so we can help just kind of get the facts out there and help people make fact-based assessments on what the master plan is for and what we're calling for. So with that, I want to leave as much time for questions as possible, so I'll stop talking and I will open it up to questions.
Person, I think it's Stephanie Norton. We want to start things off. And then it looks like from here we'll do a question on Zoom or check to see if there's a question. Okay.
Where do we? Up here, yeah, just because the microphone, because it's on Zoom, is right there.
I have some maps here and basically I printed them out big so you can see. This is a preferred alternative. This is the changing of the taxiways. And this is the PHS priority habitat and species map from DFW. As you can see, there's a considerable amount of overlap. And I think it's implausible that you can do this construction without taking of these species. So my question is, can you guys move forward at all without an HCP?
The short answer is no.
Okay.
We fully acknowledge.
Okay, and I have a second question, which is that in your chapter 5, you have all these maps, including the different development areas, the 4 or 5 different development areas. And I counted 134 proposed hangars for those areas. But your forecast is for 15 planes by 2040. So that's that's the sort of thing, just as a regular person, seems inconsistent. So can you explain that?
So if you look at I think one of the maps for the people online that may not be able to see it, one of the maps that Betsy was holding up was the preferred alternatives map, which is this is the preferred alternative that the FAA approved as far as what the airport would be moving towards in the future if the demand supported it. And again, if we had an HCP and several other variables that would take place. And what you can see is the shaded areas have a broad, high level, just kind of designated purpose for them. So you can see the peach colored areas are general aviation, and they're broken down either general aviation aircraft, which is your smaller single engine airplanes, your 4 or 5 passenger airplanes, or general aviation corporate, which would be more of your generally speaking, your twin engine, your higher performance airplanes that small businesses would use, and also light jets. And then you have commercial air service designation down at the south end, which again would be a potential feasible location for commercial service that would be able to be supported here. And again, those areas are just broad designations, but when you go through a master planning process, your goal is to figure out what is the potential of those different areas. And so you want to actually try to zoom in on each of those areas and say, what is the potential of this acreage? So if you look on the, apologize, but say there's a 55-acre parcel that we've designated as light general aviation. So our question would be, what is the best, most efficient use of this space to get the best value out of that land? And so what Betsy's referring to is we have this map up here that shows a broad, high-level designation for what we think would be best in that location on the airfield. And then we dive deeper separately into what the potential build out could be for that area. But again, it's conceptual. And that's why those hangars that we're showing are not included on the preferred alternative, which is on the screen, because we don't want to show a potential conceptual idea as what we're actually trying to work towards, because it's only conceptual. If as Betsy pointed out, if over the next 20 years, we don't reach the forecast for what we think the aircraft operations are going to be, or the forecast for based aircraft, which I believe we're currently around 124 based aircraft. And in that 20-year planning period, we would go up to 137, is that? Thank you. And so if there's no demand, then we're not going to build hangars, right? You're not going to build a mall if there's no one to shop at the mall. You're not going to want to build hangars, and a developer is not going to want to build hangars. So we didn't want to show conceptual ideas on the preferred alternatives map when it's conceptual in nature and there's no way to know what the demand is going to be.
Okay. Well, I mean, it sort of explains some of it, but it's from a public point of view, it's confusing because part of it is you're intending and part of it is maybe.
Yeah. And
it's not clear. The other question is, I have 2 other questions. I'm sorry, I'm taking up so much time. One of them is what we talked about. If you could explain the Swire the Swire deal because it's not aviation related. If you could explain that zoning change, that would be good. Not zoning change, but the. And then the second question I have is actually for you, it might be more you, Alex, which is, you have DNR, fire retardant stored on site. What is in that?
So the retardant that we use, so the helicopters use water, to my knowledge, the aircraft that use the retardant. I could get you information on that, so I can, if you wanna send me an email, I have a business card back there, I can get you. It is a essentially earth-friendly, biodegradable material that they use. We actually asked them that question last year. So I can get you more details on that with all the specs on the
There's like
spec sheet on it.
material data safety sheets that come when you have a
I
chemical.
was just wondering, there's recent research that's talking about those retardants having a lot of heavy metals in them. So that's why I wanted to know what it is.
Yeah, find out exactly what's in it.
Great. And then if you can just, I'll leave you with the Swire question.
Fire question, yes.
Yes, so so on the screen, if you look on the right-hand side, there's a large dark blue shaded area called aviation related industrial. Some of you may be aware that we have an option to lease agreement with Swire, which is a bottling plant. And the location that is intended for that bottling plant would be in that area that's designated currently is designated as aviation related industrial. In order for that plant to be able to be built, aside from the environmental process that we would have to go through, the airport would actually have to work with the FAA to get permission to redefine that shaded area as non-aeronautical. And so a bottling plant is not an aeronautical use. It's not an aircraft storage hangar. It's not an aircraft parts manufacturing. It's not an aircraft manufacturer itself. And so we would actually have to work with the FAA for them to give us permission to reclassify that as non-aeronautical in order to be able to use that site. So it would be a multi-stage process for that option to lease to become a lease with Swire, the bottling plant. Does that answer? And one, if I could just for maybe 90 seconds or maybe slightly longer, Gio brought up a good question about some of the confusion around an FAA master plan. And I think it's worth noting that FAA master plans are slightly different than other master plans that you might be familiar with when you see other municipalities and even the port itself doing master plans. Because FAA master plans are kind of like, I like to use the analogy that's kind of like guardrails on a freeway, where we can go in a certain direction, but the Federal Aviation Administration kind of sets limits on our creativity, so to speak, on what we can do with the airport land. And so with that regard, it's a little bit different. And it's also, as Bessie was pointing out, some of the confusion as far as this high level diagram here, but then you have more zoomed in diagrams showing conceptual ideas. It's just important to point out that FAA master plans are conceptual in nature for a lot of what you propose in that plan, compared to another master plan you might see in the community where somebody wants to build out a facility and they zero in on every detail, that the square footage, what kind of purpose is it going to be general use for, say, event planning? Are they going to have, residential upstairs, all sorts of different things like that? How much parking space? Usually they take a master plan like that, you narrow it down to all the details, and then once that's adopted, you start pursuing the funding options and actually start pursuing the execution of that master plan. Whereas with FAA master plans, you're talking conceptually because you're talking about a forecasted future potential need, but no guaranteed need. So in our case, we're expecting, based on our forecast, about a 1% growth per year in aviation operations. But that's a forecast. It may not happen. So you're not going to start taking action for, it's not a, if you build it, they will come situation, essentially. It's a, if they come, this is how we could possibly respond to that demand. So it's a little bit different than how other master plans operate. I'm not sure if that was helpful or more confusing, but I think there's a little bit of confusion about how FAA master plans and how they operate differently than other master plans you might be familiar with. So.
We'll see if anybody online has a question. Missy, anybody?
Do you have any raised hands at the moment?
Okay, perfect. We'll take another one in person here. So Christy.
Oh, wait, I do.
Oh, all right, back to Zoom it is. Perfect.
Want somebody from Zoom?
Yes, please.
I'm asking George or I mean.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My question is, what provision is there for future hangar construction within the plan? And is any construction to be handled by the port itself, or is that contracted out to third parties?
Could you please clarify the first part of that question, as far as the provision?
Well, I'm wondering, I mean, I'm looking at the airport and I've not reviewed the master plan, so I apologize for this information might be available. But I see that the hangars are largely clustered on the northeast side of the field. And I'm wondering what provision there is within the master plan for future hangar construction. That's basically the question.
Okay, are you able to see the screen that we have showing right now?
No, all I see is the audience at the hearing.
Okay,
We're working on it.
we're working on sharing it right
Okay,
now.
now I see it. Yes, thank you.
So that diagram is what the FAA approved, or agreed to approve on the as far as future development for the airport. And so each of those colored areas, have a different designation at the airport. As far as hangar space, most of that is going to be concentrated in that peach colored shaded areas where you'll see the titles saying GA small or GA corporate. Those are the different areas that have been designated for potential future hangar space.
Okay, so this drawing, however, is not oriented to north up. It looks like
East.
north is, I see the north arrow now. Okay, so it's the peach colored areas or the red colored areas where it says GA small. Those are the areas where you might see new hangar construction. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and when that construction occurs, if it does occur, are those Port of Olympia facilities or are those private facilities?
So generally speaking, it would most likely be private facilities. Normally what we would do is we would provide a land lease and a developer would build those hangars and then they would sublease those hangars. We would have one tenant with the developer, whatever that hangar development size was.
Okay, so that's a substantial, looking at the plan that you've got on the screen there, that looks like a fairly substantial, roughly doubling the size of hangar areas for future aircraft hangars for general aviation, small aircraft. Would you agree with that statement?
That's how it shows, but keep in mind, when we do a master plan with the FAA, what this diagram is showing, it's showing what conceptually is possible on the airfield when you take into consideration such requirements as distance from runways, distance from taxiways, and making sure the aircraft are far enough underneath some of what are called Part 77 airspace surfaces. There's invisible surfaces around the runways that go up at an angle, and so structures have to be underneath those surfaces. So, for instance, you have to make sure when you want to build a hangar that when you consider what height the structure is going to be, that it's going to be underneath that. And so, what this diagram is showing is based on FAA design and safety standards. This is the maximum conceptual build out of the airport.
Okay, but
Not saying this is, sorry, go ahead.
well, thank you. But these areas for general aviation, small hangar construction or potential construction, those are within the airport property boundary, is that correct? Or is that outside parcels?
No, that is all inside the existing airport owned property.
Okay, so an individual could, if they wanted, bid for a lease on these properties to build hangars, is that correct?
They wouldn't bid, but it wouldn't necessarily be a bid, but yeah, they could come to the port and show their interest in wanting to develop hangars. We would sit down with them and see what their needs were. This, of course, is dependent upon the fact that we would have a habitat conservation plan at that point that would allow us to do that development. Currently, we do not have a habitat conservation plan, so none of this development could move forward at the moment.
But all the property would be leased, is that correct? In other words, leased from the Port of Olympia?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you very much for answering my questions.
You're welcome.
Yeah, we'll go back in here in person. Yep. Question.
First of all, thank you for doing this meeting. I'm just really thrilled and thank you for the FAC report that came out. That was also very helpful. I'm rather new to airport work a little bit, other than I lived under the third runway of SeaTac Airport most of my life. So I'm very familiar with planes coming overhead and shaking the house. One of the questions that I had that I'm a little fuzzy on is in the entire master plan, as you're developing it, who at the end of the day will make the decision about what happens with the airport? Is it the FAA or is it our local port commissioners? I mean, where does that line happen?
Can I ask a clarification? When you say what will happen with the airport, is that me?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. I just had a question, a clarification. Just it decides what will happen with the airport. Are you speaking sort of existentially, like whether the airport exists or what on sort of a
Based on what-
project basis?
Based on what your master plan that you develop and you say, well, the airport could handle this. This is the capacity. This is what we could do. That's presented to the FAA. Then what happens? Does that make, maybe I'm not phrasing that well.
So, assuming the master plan were adopted, okay? What we would do at that point is there's two different components. There's the design and safety standards of the runways and taxiways that are in the master plan. The port ourselves would pursue trying to bring our taxiways and runways up to the current FAA design and safety standards. So we would be pursuing that. So we would go to our commission and ask them for permission to help us pursue FAA grants and working with the FAA, who we meet with on a regular basis, and we do 5-year planning with the FAA. We meet with them every year to update that 5-year planning on our capital projects. It would be grant eligible. So that would be part one. Part two, as far as development on the airfield, a developer would come and show interest in wanting to develop on the airfield through a land lease. We would then go to our commission to see if they support that. And then we would take that request to the FAA, and the FAA would take the request for the land lease that we want to do for the hangar development, and they would compare that against our master plan to make sure that they're compatible. And the location of it, those Part 77 airspace services I was talking about, they would go through that whole checklist of making sure it meets their requirements for safety and design standards. And they would give us permission to move forward with the environmental process and then move forward from there.
So my question then, kind of behind the question is though, looking at, how many more planes, we'd have large jets, we'd have as much as, maybe 16 landings and takeoffs every day if the 78 passenger planes start coming through. As you kind of heard from all of us, folks aren't real excited about having a much larger airport than what we have. Not everybody agrees with that, but if we go through this whole process though, it still kind of feels like public doesn't have a say. Is that correct? Or will we go through a, public hearing and process? How does that work? Yes.
So I would probably want to start with addressing your comment about the fact that the public doesn't want this. I understand there are definitely members of the public that don't want this, so I understand that. But I would like to maybe talk to. So back in, I think it was 2019, the port did an outreach that was, I think it was a year-long outreach. They spent several months during the summer months. This is a copy of it actually right here. It's available on the port's website. And it goes into all the detail about they reached out to thousands of people. They collected over 1,700 responses from members of the public, 10,000 data points from the public about the port as a whole, including the airport. The surveys were open-ended surveys, meaning that they didn't ask, what's your hierarchy, A, B, C, or D? It was more like, when you think about the port, what do you think of? What's a priority to you? It was open-ended, so there was no guiding, leading, multiple choice answers. And as part of that, and I think I have a slide up here that can show you the results for the airport. So as a result of that, and it's in this document, one of the priorities that we heard from the public was track feasibility for adding air commuter service at the airport. And that was again, after doing a year-long heavy involvement in engaging the public. And the nice thing about this document, and I'd encourage everybody to look at it online, is it actually lists all the different ways they reached out, how we reached out to the community, the types of surveying that we did, the kind of presentations. We did presentations from the Rotary clubs to the Coalition of Neighborhood Associations. I mean, they're all listed here. It was one of the most comprehensive I've personally, so I've only been here a little bit less than a year. But this is one of the most comprehensive public outreaches I've seen. And based on that, the number one priority that we received from the feedback was community was interested in seeing what the feasibility was of bringing commercial service back to the airport. And I say back because if you're new to the area, you may not know that we've actually had commercial service here in the past. And so that's part of the reason why, as part of this master planning process, we have the appendix that was looking into the feasibility of commercial service and what it would take to do that. So.
Yeah, but you still have questions about where in the process of exploring commercial service and maybe heading down the path. It's opportunity for public input.
Right, because obviously feasibility, yes, it could, but then at what cost would that be? You know, the other side of it. So that's.
And I will say that there's, it references it in that appendix about commercial service that the port would need, I think it's called a Part 139 certification. And it's a, the feasibility study says before you can have commercial service, you need to sort of make the following improvements. And I think to get a Part 139 certification, we have to show the FAA that we have made all these improvements. So there's a lot of process that we would need to go through and a lot of work with the commission and approvals from the commission to go pursue that Part 139 certification. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for the elected officials to weigh in and for the public to weigh in on that as well. I don't know, Chris, is there more?
I would just say our current commissioners are very proactive about hearing from the community. And so, especially on a topic like this,
Yeah, I mean, we know this is like the biggest, it feels like, to folks about commercial service. And so we want to make sure that we are reaching out and getting current input from folks and really taking the temperature of the community.
Okay, super, thank you.
I will add too that with regard to your initial premise about the FAA versus commission, who does what, who makes sure it all happens, is we have to ensure that everything that we do is in compliance with the master plan with regard to FAA design standards, requirements, and safety issues. But nothing in this plan gets executed, not one bit, unless our port commission approves it. That's the part of the annual budget process. The capital budgets, the projects that we take before the commission every year, and then each additional capital project from the time the contracts are issued to a land lease is promulgated, actually has to come through the commission, go ahead for individual approval. And every one of those are done in open session with public comment authorized. So we get every single step of this process. It's very open, very public, very transparent, and requires commission approval ultimately.
and always feel free to reach out to me directly. I have business cards in the back. I'm always happy to talk with people, go get coffee, sit at the airport, take you on a tour, whatever you want, just to make sure that you have all the facts to make your opinions. So.
Wonderful. Then I'll start getting into the balance sheet of the, I'm an accountant by trade, so maybe you don't want to have coffee with me. Thank you.
Your work or?
Thank you very much. Thanks.
We'll check online if there's any questions. If not, Michelle, you do have.
Yes, I have to reset.
Okay, we'll take the online question. And then after that, Michelle, you'll be on.
Yes, hi, thank you. I think most of my questions have been answered, but a few left are the impact on the roads surrounding the airport, particularly on the east side along Old Highway 99. Any development that's expected to occur in the future, is that expected to be impacted in any major way?
I will say that if we head down the path of something as impactful as commercial service, we'll absolutely be working with the city of Tumwater and analyzing impacts from additional traffic on roads surrounding the airport. So that's definitely something that we would have to do for, I think, permitting from the city of Tumwater, and then as part of an environmental analysis about commercial service.
Okay. You had two areas circled in red that were expected, I believe, land acquisitions. Are any of those currently private property?
Yeah, so those show up on our 2013 master plan. They're both currently privately owned. We're not actively pursuing those parcels. If they became available, we were able to, at the time, we could pursue those. I don't know if I have a picture of that. Sorry, Missy. So, I don't have them circled on here, but it's kind of hard to explain. On the top, there's a yellow trapezoid at the top of the screen and a yellow trapezoid on the right side of the screen. Those trapezoids are at the end of the runways and runway protection zones. They're part of the FAA design standards. There's one small parcel on the top of the screen in that yellow one, and there's also a small parcel that's privately owned. One's like 1.9 acres. The other parcel, I think, is about 2.6 acres. Don't quote me on those numbers. And they're inside the runway protection zone. So if we had the opportunity in the future to purchase, we would purchase them for the purpose of just protecting the safety of aircraft operations. They would not be developed. They would actually remain or return back to being just natural vegetation.
Okay.
That answer the question?
Yes, and I guess too, I don't know if this is exactly a question, but I can't help but wonder that it feels like there's a lot going on, a lot of development going on in the area commercially within fairly close proximity to the airport. It makes me think that there's been a lot more planned than we're led to believe, and I don't know if you can address that at all.
Well, I guess, the lands that the port owns in Tumwater, almost all, is that fair to say, were deeded to us by the FAA. And they are, the FAA says they need to either be used for airport-related purposes, or the revenue that's generated from them has to go to support airport operations. So those are the sort of, it's almost like a deed restriction that comes with the FAA deeded lands. However, and they also have been zoned industrial by the city of Tumwater as part of their comprehensive plan. That if we're going to have industrial activity, it should be located in this centralized area. So the thing for us right now is most of that land is covered or populated by gophers. Some of the endangered species that we need a habitat conservation plan to protect. So we don't, the port doesn't have a lot of plans to go ahead immediately, except there is one development on port-owned property that does not have gophers on it that is hoping to go forward this summer. It's a 29-acre project.
And I'll add too, the other development you see around the airport is taking place on privately owned land. It's not on port-owned land, especially along 93rd. You see the new developments that are going on along there. Also along the east side of the airport, there's been some development over there by, I think J.R. Walters is over there, and a few other pictures. That's done by a private development company called Kaufman on privately owned land. And you say, well, how come they can develop, but the port lands are not being developed? Is they had already previously arranged for a habitat conservation plan on their properties through the city and through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Agency. So the end result is they already had the habitat mitigation protections in place to allow that development to take place. But that is completely between those companies and those individuals and the city and or Thurston County, especially down on 93rd Avenue. Those are outside the port purview.
Yeah, a lot of those are outside of the port, but it seems like a lot of the development, like you said, along 93rd and close to the interstate, it just seems like there's a lot of commercial development going on that makes you wonder. They're expecting a larger airport to accommodate a lot of the reason why they're developing, I guess is the best I can say. So it just makes me think that maybe the airport's really going to expand more than we're led to believe. And that's what's one of my concerns, but you don't seem to be indicating that. So
yeah, no, the developments that we see taking place are independent of airport operations. We haven't seen a direct nexus at all from those developments in terms of airport demand.
No, I know they're independent, but it just seems like they know something we don't know. Like maybe the airport's really planning on doing more than we're led to believe. I guess that's what I'm up to.
If
But
they don't know either.
Yeah, and I think if it has to be in the master plan, to be even contemplated, and I don't think the kind of commercial aircraft is in the master plan. It's contemplated. So, you know, if that case, my goal is that we'd be very transparent about it, but as Warren indicated, those are independent developments.
okay. And so just to repeat, I think you addressed it earlier. All these other areas on the map, the dark gray, the light grays, those large parcels of land, those are just kind of being held in reserve. There's absolutely no plans in the immediate future, the next 5 years even, to develop those. Is that right?
Well, we just clarify that. So we do have an lease agreement with Swire Bottling Plant in that large blue section on the right side of the upper right side of the screen that's labeled aeronautical industrial. That would have to go through a process. That is the only option to lease or lease for undeveloped land that we currently have for airport land right now. Inside the fence, there's also outside the fence for non-aeronautical purposes, which is probably less of a concern because it's not airplane traffic. We do have leases on some of the land, as Alex just pointed out, with Panattoni. Lost my train of thought on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think otherwise, in terms of hangars being built, we need a habitat conservation plan. Not sure when that will come to fruition. And then in terms of, I guess, individual hangars being built, once we have a habitat conservation plan, that's really a question of people coming to us and indicating there's a demand for it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I would just say if our answer is not thorough enough, please follow up and be accountable to a clearer answer or email me afterwards, because we really do want to make sure that we're as transparent as possible and that there isn't any concerns that we're hiding anything. So I just want to please reach out to me. Sorry, Michelle.
Thank you for giving us this opportunity. And I'm not very good at speaking publicly. The CACC plan for a mega airport, that was what, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago? It looked to me in the beginning of this process with the Olympia Airport that we were going to be going through the same thing. And one of my questions to you is, when you made this plan, I see a footprint, but as with the CACC plan, all I could see was, it looked to me as if somebody took a picture or a cutout of their planned runways, like for instance, this one, and kind of stuck it around and says, oh, let's see where he fits. They considered only the footprint of the airport itself. But when you think of the logistics and the infrastructure that you are going to need, it's 10 times what you're showing there. We're talking about widening 99. We're talking about putting in sewers, more water, like the Squires, that's going to be taking a lot of water. The infrastructure, you're going to need more power. You're going to need more of everything. Like for instance, where's all that garbage going to go? That your 500 parking lots, or your tanks for the fuel and the hangars and everything. All that stuff generates trash. For instance, people wanting to get on the airplane, they're going to go and get something to eat, and then, you know, they got to get rid of their trash, and they're going to have to find a place to park or spend the night before they get on the aircraft. This is what is scaring people, because I'm thinking, well, my house is at the end of the runway. You're going to say either, well, we're going to give you fair market value for a house that at the end of a runway, as one of our Christy said, she lived in SeaTac. Her house is probably worth about $10,000. So you sell your house for $10,000. I'm just throwing money out. Where are you going to go? How can you afford a house in this thing you're gonna have to find a new job, kids are gonna have to go to a new school. This is what we're seeing. We're seeing, okay, we'll have all these aircrafts coming in, but I'm gonna be living underneath a flight path. I'm gonna be suffering from noise, pollution, congestion. When you make this plan, are you considering the big picture rather than just your plan for runways?
Oh, the short answer is we will. For a master plan at this stage, at the conceptual level, we just did a feasibility study to see if the airport was even capable of supporting the infrastructure to do that. You bring up really good questions, and all those questions would be addressed during an environmental process if that point in time came to fruition. So if an airline was interested in coming here and they started those conversations with us and we had the support, then we would start the full environmental process to evaluate everything that you just mentioned. But again, I just want to reiterate, not only is there no intent from the port commissioners or leadership of not just the port, but the surrounding cities, City of Tumwater, City of Olympia, there is no support for us becoming a reliever airport for SeaTac that level. And we also do not have the infrastructure to support that. Our runway is not capable of handling 747s. I could just to kind of go into a little detail for you. I just kind of, I'm glad, thank you for the question. So this is actually from the feasibility study. This is from appendix 4-1 of the feasibility study. And this is in reference to whether or not this has to do with that confusion around that CAC, the Commercial Aviation Coordination Commission back in 2019. And this is addressing that CAC. And so if you just, in the highlighted areas, if you just focus on what's in bold, essentially what our feasibility study determined was that we're not going to become a major commercial hub like a SeaTac. We're incapable of it. We could want it and it still wouldn't happen. And what's underlined in that second paragraph where it says, this study finds it extremely unlikely and infeasible that OLM is an option to fill this need. What is potentially feasible after we vet through all of those legitimate concerns that you have is based on the population of the community and so forth. When you read that feasibility study, and there's a little bit of confusion because again, this is a 20-year airport master plan talking about conceptual ideas. And so what's included in this feasibility study is electric and hybrid aircraft being used in a commercial manner. And those aren't commercially available for that purpose yet, at least not here. And so when you look at the preferred feasibility option for commercial service at our airport, you can actually just remove, because of the way the technology stands as of today, we don't have electric aircraft for commercial service. There are some there are some manufacturers that are working on those, and I've shared that in some prior commission meetings, but those are not readily available. So when you look at just what's available with the jets for like an airliner jet to provide that service, we're looking at about 8 operations a day would be like the maximum that we think. And an operation is a landing or takeoff. So you'd have 4 arriving and 4 departing flights per day in about a 75 passenger jet. And that's what we would likely see about 10 to 15 years from now, I believe is the forecast for that. Assuming there was demand for it, that the population in Thurston County grew enough to support that. Because an airline is only going to be interested in our airport if they think that there's a demand, right? And just to kind of give you a little bit of a visual of what a 75 passenger jet that we could potentially support now with our current infrastructure. It's the one circled in red is called an Embraer 175. And you can see a Boeing 747 is the gigantic one on the top of the screen. And these aren't exactly to scale compared to each other, but they're actually a pretty good representation of the size compared. So you can see just from that image, we are not capable of bringing 747s here. We don't have the population density here to support that. An airline wouldn't even try. But the Embraer 175, which is circled in the red circle, that would be the most reasonable jet where you would see, assuming that there was a demand for it and assuming the population would support that demand, 4 takeoffs, 4 landings per day in that size aircraft.
Yeah, and again, there's lots of steps that would need to be taken in order to even start down the path of trying to make the airport something that could handle even that level of commercial service. And that it involves the commission, and we definitely, because it is a big issue for the community, make sure we have lots of public process around it.
Thank you.
From,
Do,
yeah, from a wider image too, it was really a case of just really terrible timing in terms of the community, because here the state is looking at how do we address the aviation needs of the entire Puget Sound region and CTAC's limitations and the growth and the demand of that. And at the same time, we were focused on what's Olympia Regional Airport going to do in terms of this overall, its place in the aviation system, right, to serve our community. But they were both happening at the same time. And it's no question that the port, you know, that the community would be confused by that. Just to be very clear, in terms of that wider capacity for the aviation, the Port Commission is on record twice, you know, in formal, and I have a copy of the record right here, but I'm gonna just read the important parts to you. The Port of Olympia has no interest in being considered for sponsorship of a potential greenfield airport at a future Thurston County location. Additionally, the Port of Olympia has no interest in Olympia Airport expansion to meet the future aviation capacity needs of the state of Washington. Period. The end, July 2020. And then again, in conjunction with every governmental jurisdiction in Thurston County, every mayor, every county, the Board of County Commissioners, and our Port Commission on October 24, 2022 in commission action, they added our signature as a Port Commission to this letter to the coordinating commission going, we're not going to play in that environment, you know, not for this community. You know, we understand the need for addressing CTAC's capacity, but we have no interest in being a sponsor or supporting that in Thurston County. And we are a signatory to that letter to the commission. So just so that you're aware on the Port Commission stance on that.
thank you. I do have one more question. In the email that you sent me, thank you, ma'am. It said something about in 20 years, you would have like 232 flights. And my question is, are you tracking flights now? So anybody who takes off in a Cessna, is that counted as flight or landing?
Yes, there's a small margin of error in there because our air traffic control tower operates from 8 AM to 8 PM. And so any flights that leave or come to the airport from 8 PM to 8 AM the next morning, there's no way to track those. That's a relatively small percentage of the overall activity. But so we're capturing 99% of the activity with.
So in that number that I believe was 232, does that include general aviation?
Yes, it does.
That's all operation. That's all landings and
Flight
takeoffs.
schools, general aviation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
And I would like to just to address that, you can sit down, I apologize. Just to further address that, the forecast for 2020 for the number of operations at the airport was 70,466. But we actually only saw 64,816 operations that year. So we are actually tracking below that forecast because the forecast is an estimate, right? And so, and in 2024, which is just last year, in 2021, I want to be transparent. I want to make it look like I'm trying to like hide things. In 2021, we did see a pretty significant increase for 1 year where we had a little over 71,000 operations, but then it jumped right back down into the 60s again. And for 2024, we saw 63,474 operations, which again is a landing or a takeoff. So I share that because our 2020 forecast, and the forecast is supposed to be rising at approximately 1% a year, which is in line with Thurston County's overall population growth forecast. But we are, as of 2024, we are still below the forecast of what we should have seen in operations for back in 2020. So the growth is a little bit slower than what the forecast was thinking might happen.
And the spike in 2021 was during, of course, the COVID pandemic. When you look at what the aviation increase was, it tracks exactly with what were people doing in terms of recreational pursuits. They were going in RVs. RV purchases went through the roof. You know, camping trips went through the roof. Personal boating and things along those lines went through because they could do it in their family integral unit. And general aviation, you're traveling in small groups, you know, and most likely your family. So the opportunity was is you could do that and exercise that opportunity without exposing yourself to any particular health hazards. And so what we saw in terms of that 1 year spike tracked exactly with the RV industry, the camping industry, the personal boating industry, right along the same lines. And then we saw it back down.
We'll check online to see if there's a question, and if not, we'll have Joan.
I've got Tom Fender. I'm asking him to unmute.
Okay, I'm here.
Hi, Tom.
Thank you for doing this. I'm fairly familiar with airport operations. I'm a former Navy pilot and a commercial pilot. And I think what we're really talking about tonight is the nose of the camel under the tent in terms of the future uses of this actually municipal airport. It's not suitable for much more than what it's doing right now, based on its proximity to sensitive neighborhoods. And I think when you consider that the Precision runway is aligned with the South Capitol and the Carline and the Tumwater Valley and the altitudes at which the aircraft are flying at is so proximate to the ground that the noise pollution is going to be significant. And of course, turbine aircraft are just as bad as piston aircraft in terms of particulates. In fact, they're worse because the particulates are smaller. So turbine aircrafts don't really represent a cleaner form of aviation from a practical point of view. And that is my principal concern. And remember, the port commissioners are elected officials, and they don't bind any future elected officials. So I guarantee that this is not going to develop from the current port commissioners is essentially worthless. And I think we've all seen how when you apply pressure to politics, suddenly people change their mind. And that would be my principal concern. And since you really don't have anybody wanting to come in here and plant commercial service, why do anything? I think it would be nice to improve the facility, but you're talking about spending a lot of money for a business that doesn't exist. And that perhaps is too practical an approach. And I realize things change, but that's the way I look at it. And I think this is more ambition than ability.
Can you clarify what you mean by spending money and who you think is spending the money?
Well, if you're going to make improvements, what are you going to make the improvements with?
Well,
I think there's a misconception. We won't build anything related to commercial service unless we have a commitment from an airline that they want to come, that they think there's a demand here and that there's a market here. So it's in terms of the chicken and the egg, we're not going to build anything, do anything related to commercial service unless there's first a commitment essentially from an airline that they want to come here and that they also want to invest their money into making this work.
Well, we've had two airlines come and go.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, and they're looking at that too. I think any air commercial service provider is looking at, is this even a viable market?
I mean, now granted, metro liners are not going to attract the flying public, which was the last commercial service. And people don't like little airplanes in terms of the commercial traffic. So you really have to upscale to that Embraer that you're talking about in order to operate. And then you've got the problem of all that traffic is going to come through your principal instrument runway, which puts all that noise and all that pollution over some of the nicest neighborhoods in this community. Not to mention the people at the end of the airport who have to listen to the noise when you take off to the southwest. And that's the prevailing wind. You know where all the traffic is going to come from. And I think you definitely want to have a workable plan, but I think a lot of this maybe fall under the ambition category and not the reality category. And I don't think we want to push it to a greater state of reality and maintain environmental standards within this community. That's my opinion.
Thank you for that and appreciate that. And I think, again, we're not pushing, we're not trying to build out this stuff. It's in the event a commercial carrier comes to the port and says there's demand and we're interested. And there's a certain, because of FAA assurances and the fact that FAA deeded all this land to us, we have limits around how and when we could say no to that if a commercial carrier came to us and asked for it. But again, we're not pushing for it. This is just in the event the carrier comes. We wanted to understand what would need to happen sort of in terms of infrastructure to allow that to happen. And yeah, are there improvements that would need to be made for us to?
Well, here's what would happen is a commercial carrier would come and they would say, we're interested in bringing in larger airplanes, but we want the runway extended. And I can't imagine any serious commercial carrier wanting to operate out of here with turbine aircraft other than turboprops. And I think you're asking for a problem that the community doesn't really want.
Thank you.
That's an opinion, of course,
Yeah.
and everyone has one.
Just to
Thank you for listening.
Yeah, no, and just to reiterate what Alex said, we're not pursuing this. This feasibility study was again in response to the feedback from the public from the Vision 2050 research that was done back in 2019. So this feasibility study was as a response to that to see what the feasibility is. So
Well, since then, remember, the alternative to SeaTac went down in flames, and the study was conducted in 2019. There's a lot of incentive to find other places to land commercial aircraft. And while they may not be knocking on your door today, it wouldn't surprise me that they were here in 6 months.
Okay.
well, thank you. Appreciate that. We did address some of that earlier in the evening. I'm not sure if you were here for that, but yeah, thank you for your comments. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Sounds like Joan? Yep.
Actually, my name is Jean, and I am just so glad that this gentleman was here because he is so much more knowledgeable and articulate than I am. But it was exactly what I wanted to talk about here is that I have tried not to even think about any 747s. I'm thinking about just regular airplanes that come and go here at Olympia Airport, and just how annoying it is just with the current amount of planes. And it was just actually today, I thought, how amazing that it was just today. It's been so rainy and cold and windy. Nobody goes out. I went out in the sunshine in my backyard today, and I was talking on the phone to a friend, and a plane flew over. I felt like I could practically touch it right over my house. And, I had to say, hold on a minute till the plane goes by. And this happens all the time. In the summer when I'm out, I try to be out, I work in my yard, my garden. I talk to my neighbors. I have people over, and it just is ridiculous how, impossible it is to live that way. And so I'm irritated by just what we currently have. And when I think about, that all this, nice space, having more just, other airplanes of just, people that decide they're going to fly in and all of it, they're going to have new hangars and maybe no jets or no, passenger planes, but there's going to be, other private planes. And these are rich people who fly on these planes. I don't fly on those planes. I've never flown in or out of Olympia Airport. And yet every day, there's these people who clearly have a lot more money than me, are coming and breaking, disturbing the peace of my neighborhood. And I have no idea about, who they are and could I do anything about it? I just don't, I don't know. I've never called and complained. I don't know much about, because I think, I live here and this is what it is, and I try to accept it. But the idea of more of it, You know, I wasn't even thinking about like big airplanes, but just more of what we've got. And just those, student flights, and they just fly over in a circle around and around and around and around and around. It's like, oh my God. I mean, if I bother people in my neighborhood as much as they bother me, I would probably get in trouble with the homeowners association. You know, it's like, so I don't know. I just went, this other gentleman was just, bringing this up about, I live not too far from Olympia High School. And it's just the thought of this between, and also then, not that you have anything to do with this, but just then all the military flights that go over of the helicopters, and they're just treetop sometimes, it seems like, as well. And it's just like really hard. It's stressful. It's annoying. It is like, so I don't know, the idea of any expansion at the airport like bothers me. Some music accompanying. Whoa.
Very dramatic music.
I was gonna say, wow, but anyway, that's all I wanted to say. I don't know if there's anything to, really speak about, but he was explaining this, like, why are we considering adding more when what we've got is really hard, and it's, flying over, our really nice neighborhoods, and, regular people who are just trying to, live their life. And I mean, I literally just today, I had to like interrupt a phone call because there was a plane flying right over my house and I couldn't talk anymore. So anyway, I just wanted to say that.
And I guess, I think we've been trying to say, a lot of this it's sort of like a city's comprehensive plan where Thurston Regional Planning Council says, here's what the expected population growth is in Thurston County. And then it says to the various municipalities, when you do your comprehensive plan, show how you could accommodate this additional growth. And to a certain extent, that's what our FAA master plan is about. It's the FAA saying, here's the growth that's anticipated, or the increased demand that's anticipated. And as Chris said, it's sort of based on the population growth. And we're anticipating 1% a year. In your master plan, show us how you could accommodate that growth. And that's fundamentally what it is. It's, I don't want folks to think that we're out there beating down the doors of commercial service folks to try to get them to come. That's not what's happening. So we're just trying to do what the FAA tells us to do to show how we could accommodate that growth.
One of the challenges that we have, for those of us that are within the industry, is what we call compatible land use. And it is a struggle because the state has put together an outstanding guideline of what compatible land use looks like, what development should be around the airport. And they create an overlay in what is compatible, what's not compatible. And it pains me when it's legal for the current land use zoning for an apartment complex just off of Tumwater Boulevard, less than a half mile from the airport fence, to have 400 apartments and a daycare center. But that's legal because the state guidelines are not regulatory. All land use is local. We are working very closely right now. City of Tumwater is going through an update to its comprehensive land use plan. Chris and I have worked very closely with city staff to go ahead and say, let's get additional information into this comprehensive plan so that there is greater protection around the airport to avoid these incompatible land uses, and that for anybody moving into this area is provided with what we call it in the industry an navigation easement. It puts people on notice right as part of the title that, that there are pre-existing homes before, these land use compatible guidelines have been really put into place. And we need to create greater awareness on that. If there was a way to get these guidelines to be regulatory on a local basis, that would be the key. But the state cannot impose its guidelines on local land use authorities. All land use decisions are local, and that's your cities and counties. The port itself, we go through, because the airport is located in the city of Tumwater, we do not do our own land use approvals. Everything that we do is subject to the city of Tumwater development regulations. But getting that compatible land use guidelines incorporated is one of the issues that we're working on these comp plans. And that is a huge challenge, for sure.
I would just to kind of echo the significance of what Warren is sharing with you. I don't have slides on it, but in the fact sheet that's available in the back of the room, and it's also available on our website, I took a picture of just from Google Earth, and then there was a historic picture of the airport. And there's a picture from 1941, and you can see it's just rural around the airport. There's no housing developments. There's no, I don't even see a gas station. There's like, I think it's just mainly farmland. And then the picture next to it is from last year, 2024, and you can just see how the development, the housing has gotten closer to the airport. The airport didn't move close to the housing, the development came to the airport. And so the airport's actually been here since 1928. And so just to kind of reiterate Warren's point, it really is difficult to find that compatibility, that happy medium between compatibility and you're not going to be able to satisfy everyone when they are near under a flight path or near the airport. And so it's very difficult. It is very difficult. We respect that.
We'll see if there's a question online and if not,
I have Patrick Townsend. I'm asking for you.
Hi, yeah, this is Patrick Townsend and Catherine Townsend. Thank you for an opportunity to comment. First off, I would just like to second everything that Tom Fender said. It's just, I think, as you probably well know, people feel very traumatized by the CACC process and the potential of all of the impacts on people who live here. So I guess you've probably heard that. I guess the concern that one of the concerns I have is that I hear the conversation today orienting around demand from commercial interest, not orienting around the desires of the citizens who live in and around this area. I mean, you can be pretty far away and be impacted by planes that are landing. So, and when I hear that there's a forecast of 1% growth per year, I don't hear that as a cap. I hear that as, oh, well, it might be more or it might be less. It could be a lot more. And I don't really see that being addressed. So my question is, why isn't that 1% a cap or a cumulative cap? So that's one question I have. The second one I have is that I'm glad you mentioned, electric planes and drones. In my business, I engaged with a robotaxi firm, and they are well along on deploying commercial robotaxi and commercial freight operations. And I really think that that's not being taken into account here in terms of the overall plan and the potential for a large uptick in traffic at the port. So I just would like to hear a little bit more about how the commissioners look at this, and really we'd like to see not loose language about infeasible or unlikely. We'd like to see caps. I'd like to see stronger language like shall not exceed blah blah blah. So anyway, just those two issues I think are resonating for us. I'd really like to hear your thoughts about that too. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm glad you asked that question because I should have brought this up earlier with a couple of my previous answers. So the airport is not allowed to cap flights. We are part of what's known as the National Plan of Integrated Airport Systems. The short term is NIPIAS. It's an FAA term, Federal Aviation Administration. We are one of just over about 3,000, little over 3,000 airports across the country that are funded by the FAA as part of that integrated airport system. We're considered a critical part of the airspace system. And so because of that, as Director Smith alluded to earlier, we have grant assurances that we're required to meet with the FAA as being part of that. And this goes all the way back to when the airport was deeded to us. And so we can't cap those flights. In fact, I think I have, I don't know if I was smart enough to put a slide for that or not. But grant assurance number 22A, for those of you that love going on Google, grant assurance 22A states that we cannot arbitrarily limit or discriminate against any type of aircraft. We can't discriminate against helicopters or jets versus piston. We have to make the airport available to all those aircraft. And so we don't have the ability to say, you know what, at 70,000 operations a year, that's it, we can't take it anymore. If the airport is capable of supporting it and aircraft want to fly here, we have to provide that service to the aviation network across the country. And so thank you for bringing that up. That may not be an answer you want to hear, but that is the reality of being an airport that's that's part of that National Plan of Integrated Airport Systems. I would ask you if you could please repeat or restate the question regarding the electric aircraft, because I wasn't quite sure what the question was about the electric air. Like, are we taking those into consideration? Is that what you were asking, Patrick? You muted?
You're muted. Okay.
Patrick, you still with us? We lost him. I'll just try to just generally address that. In the commercial service feasibility study, appendix 4-1 of the master plan, we do take into consideration the potential for future electric taxis, vertical takeoff and landing aircraft that would be electric aircraft. There are some, I actually gave a presentation to our commission a month or two ago about some of the aircraft that actually have received certifications from the FAA and are pursuing that. We won't likely see them here for quite a while because, you need that demand. So you're going to see those kind of aircraft operating in high density areas where where you don't have street traffic, where you have a lot of street traffic and freeway traffic. So they want to avoid that. So you're going to see places like New York and Atlanta and Los Angeles are going to be some of the places that I think some of these manufacturers are talking about starting out launching their services when they get to that point. So we won't see that here, but we did take that into account that eventually it would get here as the cost of manufacturing comes down, as the efficiency of those electric aircraft, which we anticipate will be quieter. And obviously the aircraft being electric has zero emissions, so you have the quieter, cleaner, but we have to just trying to plan for the future. We will see them showing up in large cities across the country before we see that potential coming here. I'm not sure if that was his question, but
Yeah, I'm unmuted now. So the concern that I have around those kind of aircraft are that you don't need a runway extension per se to start doing that. And there was a comment before about, well, maybe that's 10 or 15 years out in the future. Frankly, I don't think that's true. And I think the development in the industry has been far more rapid than that. And so we could really see a big uptick in traffic based on new technologies that are moving forward very quickly. And I'm just really concerned about it. And I think about the emissions. Yes, when an electric vehicle is flying, it's not emitting the same way, but those have to be charged. And that means there probably would have to be charging facilities at the airport, and those do emit. I mean, there's an emission chain here that needs to be taken into account. So those are my concerns. I actually see the drone and the EV as being far bigger threat because of the speed with which this technology is advancing. So anyway, I just wanted to pop that in since you asked.
no, thank you. No, those are all valid concerns. And yeah, my 10 to 15 years, that was my crystal ball guess. So that wasn't, yeah, please don't hold me to that.
Real quick time check. We do have coming up on the 15-minute mark. We have 12 questions. So just being sensitive to time, but I do want to ask if we need to go over a little bit or how we want to manage that, but this is a time check for that. But we do have a question from Sheldon right now. We'll be sensitive on time.
Hi. I'm Sheldon Watson. I live here.
Hi, Sheldon. Good to see
Had
you.
communications in the past. I'm still waiting for an answer from you for that Swire Coca-Cola lease. So if I'm to understand correctly, is that lease posted on the website somewhere?
That I don't know.
Because
Leases typically are not posted on the website, but they're a public record, so usually.
in the interest of transparency and for accessibility to the public, I would like to request that you make that available and put that on the website. There's a few reasons why I would want to see that, because it's an interesting word tonight. You would have a trigger for bringing in commercial aviation. Is that right? Somebody would have to come to you and say, hey, we want to do commercial aviation here. Is that right?
I understand. Yeah.
And if they did that, then they could have through this arrangement that you have with aircraft, that you would have to accommodate all the landings and takeoffs that they wanted. If they came, you would have to land them and service them.
Correct.
Okay, great. So then we start talking about a Coca.
You would have to land them and service them?
You would have to land them and take off. We'll get to servicing them here in just a second though.
To make sure I don't agree to something on accident.
Oh, no, let's not do that. No, that gets into integrity. Now you're talking about Swire Coca-Cola bottling, right? Now in 2022, when that lease was put out, it was not with Swire Coca-Cola, it was with Swire. Initially, and on the 28th of November, it was 2022, it was set up with Swire LLC. When it was voted on 2 weeks later, the lease that was recorded was with Swire Land Incorporated out in Delaware. The interesting part of that is that it doesn't have anything to do with Swire Coca-Cola. Swire Coca-Cola Limited is a subsidiary company of Swire. Swire is incorporated in Hong Kong. Some of their subsidiaries just happen to be Cathay Pacific Airways, of which they own controlling interest. They also own 67% of an aircraft aviation maintenance facility. Now, that lease for Coca-Cola done 2 years ago, and they still haven't found a need to put in the bottling plant, makes me wonder, I'm very concerned that Cathay Pacific might just come calling saying, hey, and that terms of that lease were such that it could be assigned and subassigned to other entities if that were financially advantageous within that corporation. That's why I would like to see that lease put up. And then I would like to see these questions addressed. And I still haven't heard back from you about Swire because we had that public conversation about whether or not it said Swire Coca-Cola. So those are some of the concerns I've gotten. When we start seeing these kinds of things, then we start being told, oh, well, you can do a public records request. Well, that's just a barrier to communication. That makes it harder for us to get information across. So if you can get that up, that would be very good. And then if it says Swire Coca-Cola, then we'll know that. And if it doesn't say which is controlled pretty much by the Communist Chinese Party. As
Sir, I'm gonna stop you out of respect for the other people. I haven't heard a question.
the question is, how are you going to protect the aquifer? The two questions. One is to protect the aquifer, which is a critical aquifer area. It's level 1, meaning that if something gets on the ground, it'll be in the water within a year. The other is that if you're telling us that it's not going to be for commercial aviation, how are you going to prevent something like the aviation maintenance or Cathay Pacific Airlines from coming in here and turning it into what you're telling us it's not? That's my two questions.
Okay, I would ask you to maybe stick around afterwards because I'm really struggling to even know how to make the connections that I'm just being transparent with you. I'm struggling to make the connections that you're making to even try to respond to that question.
You have the possibility of putting an aviation maintenance facility over a sensitive area.
That area is approved to be a bottling plant, not approved to be an aircraft manufacturing. So that would have to go through a whole nother.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, let's talk more about it. We can definitely get you these. And yeah, I think there's ways we can make sure that have a way to then
To mitigate that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
We'll take a question online.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, hi, my name's Judy Barden, and I'm going to echo what a number of other people have said. First of all, I live over in Southeast Olympia on Hoadley Street. I'm about 5 blocks from Olympia High School, and I'm also very close to there's like 3 schools close to my area, and I believe I'm right in the flight path. And you know, this summer I was out gardening, and in a half an hour, I counted 5 planes going over. So I believe, especially in the summer when I'm outdoors, there can be 10 planes an hour going overhead. And the planes also are there late at night and make a lot of noise. So I'm also a retired environmental epidemiologist, and I'm worried about the health impacts. Actually, the noise bothers me, but I worry about the fine particulates that are being released. And I also have concerns about the schools that are in close proximity to where I live, because that's, you know, affecting the younger population. And I wondered if there was any consideration being given to limiting aircrafts at, you know, transit at night, and any thoughts to the health impacts. So for me, and the other thing I'd like to say is I moved into my house in 2004. And at that time, there was very little air traffic. I mean, I would hear a plane going overhead occasionally. And I lived in my house over on Hoadley Street until around 2013 and moved over to the west side. And I came back to Hoadley Street 2 years ago, so in 2023. And the amount of air traffic that had increased in that time frame was just stunning. It went from having, you know, just an occasional plane going overhead to, you know, 10 planes an hour. And so to me, there's already too much air traffic. And, you know, even 1% a year seems like a lot. And in terms of, you know, this is an existing neighborhood that's been here for a long time. My house was built in 1939. And I think most of the houses in my neighborhood are about of that era. So this is not new construction. These are long established existing neighborhoods in Olympia that are being pretty severely impacted already. So could you address some of the health concerns, and is there going to be any limitation of flights at night?
So again, to the question that was just asked earlier about limiting aircraft operations, we can't stop aircraft from operating here. We are a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week airport as part of the FAA's National Plan of Integrated Airport Systems. I will probably defer to our environmental director for the particulate question about the environmental health. However, I would like to just address the operations that you spoke of, that there used to be a lot less aircraft traffic at the airport. This isn't to, please don't take this the wrong way. This isn't to try to beat you up or say I'm right and you're wrong. I want to address a perception issue. I used to work at Long Beach Airport in California. And we had a noise department at that airport because they had commercial service there, and there was a very, you know, in Southern California, it's very densely populated. And so noise was tracked very closely as a result of that. And there was actually a pattern that we found, and I'm not saying this applies to you, Judy, but just to give a kind of a perception, some perception issues. We actually found that there was an increase in noise complaints at the end of the year during holidays and in the summer months. In the summer months, people take off vacation, they're home, and at the end of the year, people retire. And when they retire, they're usually at work away from where they live near the airport all day during the business hours. And then they retire, and now they're home all day, 7 days a week, and they're hearing that traffic they didn't hear for all those years that they were at the airport. I bring that up again, not to try to say anything other than in 2004, our aircraft operations at the airport were 94,069 operations, 30,000 more operations per year than we had in 2024. So I just want to say, Judy, sometimes it's a perception issue, but when you referenced in 2004, there being a lot less traffic, there was actually 30,000 more operations that year than there was in 2024. And it just, sometimes it's just a perception issue of how often you're home and why you're home and why you're not. And for reasons like that. So again, not trying to be disrespectful in a way, but just.
Can I ask a question? Did the flight paths change at all? Because I heard in the past, they used to fly a little bit more over the Tumwater area. And that the pattern shifted more to be over the Olympia area.
If you send me an email, I can give you a more detailed response. The runways did get realigned in late 90s or early 2000s, I believe. There was a realignment of the runways, which would have shifted the traffic patterns, but it would have only shifted them slightly. Again, I might have those dates wrong too. If you send me an email, I'd be happy to get you more information on that. I just don't have it readily available at hand here.
And you're Warren Hendrickson?
No, I'm Chris Paolini.
Oh, Chris. Okay. I can't tell from it's a small picture on the screen of who people are.
He's the handsome one. But I want to make sure that Sean answers the environmental question that you had as well.
Particulate question, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for the question. We at the port certainly are concerned about air quality in general, and we take the concerns of you all very seriously as well. Currently, well, the air quality, it hasn't been studied lately. And it is something that I think as we move forward, particularly with any kind of proposal for commercial service, it will be required for environmental review. So we'll be looking at all impacts from both air quality and noise. Any further environmental assessments. So.
And I think we were talking about this earlier, and we need to comply with the Federal Clean Air Act, and right now this area is doing okay. It's in attainment, which means it's doing okay.
Yeah, but you're talking about particulate matter, PM 2.5 or PM 10. You're not talking about ultrafine particulates.
And that's the challenge, is EPA doesn't regulate those yet, especially from aircraft operations. They are now studying that and will likely do that. And then we will jump on that as soon as EPA has it tells us what we need to be regulating for and how we need to be doing it.
Right, and there's also air toxics immediate concerns immediately around the airport.
Okay.
So we are currently studying that. We're following the EPA developments as they declare lead potentially an issue. So we're reviewing their studies and we'll adapt accordingly. But we hear the concerns and we'll be looking into it.
We appreciate you raising the concern. Definitely.
And is there any information on the heights that the planes fly over? Because they seem pretty low lots of times.
There are minimum altitudes for aircraft flights. Helicopters are different than airplanes. They both have different requirements. There's a lot that goes into that. When an airplane is flying in certain directions, they're required to maintain certain altitudes. But generally speaking, 1,000 feet above ground for most airplanes is the minimum altitude. But again, as you go higher, they're required to fly based on their compass heading. They're required to fly at certain altitudes. But again, helicopters are exempt from that because helicopters are slower aircraft. And so they purposely try to keep helicopters separate from the flow of airplane traffic for safety. And so helicopters operate by a different set of standards.
And is there anything about noise? Is there any parameters for that? So
we do have voluntary noise abatement procedures posted on our website. We don't have authority over the airspace. The Federal Aviation Administration has authority over the airspace. On our website, if you have information, our website has you can read the voluntary noise abatement procedures, but there's also links for the FAA for sharing your noise concerns with the FAA directly. And we also have a link to JBLM if you want to share noise concerns about the military helicopters. And you can find those on the airport's website on the port.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll take a question from Eric.
Hi, I'm Eric Prem. I'm a realtor for Better Homes and Garden in Tumwater, Washington. I lived here all my life since 1972. And unfortunately, growth is something we're not going to stop. And so, yes, I don't have a question, but I'd like to commend the port and the staff for the tireless amount of work that's gone into this for something that could be conceptual. I'm confident that the abilities of this staff and the port coming up will steward the resources that you've been charged to do. And so again, this isn't a question, but I want to commend you all. And in a sense of time, I have a whole list of ways that I'm in favor of regulated growth. But again, I'll just leave it at that. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Eric, we do have a written in question. I'd like to read it. I'll step closer to the mic so folks online can hear. In terms of environmental concerns and mitigation, if an airline does move in, what would happen if infrastructure was to be developed, displacing wildlife? Then the airline left. What would happen?
I'll take that one. Yeah, certainly, we have, We'll be concerned about any impacts to habitat in the area or to species. We're currently working with U.S. Fish and Wildlife on a habitat conservation plan. So any potential development or significant operational changes at the airport would require that we have an HCP in place first that would protect those species and would mitigate for any impacts to those.
May I add to that? Yeah, so it seems like this plan is based on current operations, the way that we fly now. And I'm thinking, one, would you have to take the first offer and of an airline? Would you have to accept the first offer if it seemed reasonable? And two, in 10 or 20 years, maybe all of that land that you're using for hangar space, golly, that could have been left for gophers because we're not needing that in the new methods of travel that we have. So I'm just, wondering if in your planning, you're thinking about not standard travel today, but in the future, how might that affect what the feasibility is and how you might use the land? Because I hate to see the gophers taken away and then, these structures put up that in 10 years you don't even need. That could be developed in a different way so that you didn't have to do this mitigation. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Any potential impacts or any development activities on airport property will require mitigation before we can develop that property.
Sean, can you explain what mitigation?
Yeah,
is?
thank you. So mitigation would be essentially you identify an area that you want to develop, and then you're required to go seek land elsewhere that will also support the same species. So you're basically taking land to develop, you're offsetting it with other land that would be good habitat for the gophers.
And are you
as well.
transferring the species?
Yes.
Yeah, generally, we're mitigating where the gophers already are. So there are areas where there are gophers or that maybe there's some gophers there. We can go in and improve that land and make it more accommodating for gopher species and raise their population. So it would be covered for any development activity on the airport.
And that would be in perpetuity.
Yes.
So that land would be reserved for gophers, that mitigation would be reserved for gophers in perpetuity.
And you did such a wonderful job of interviewing the community to find out how they felt about a feasibility of a plan. When you have an airline, are we going to have another meeting like this to say, because we're interested in finding out about the feasibility, but will we have another meeting to say, do we really want to go through with it?
Getting a head shaking yes from the executive director, so I'm gonna say
Yeah.
yes, we are.
Indeed.
On
Yeah.
something that significant, that's gonna impact the community, there would definitely be significant community reach.
Absolutely. And, my goal would be that we aren't sort of indiscriminately developing and then mitigating somewhere else. I think we'd really want to have something that we knew was something that would be there for the long haul and there's always the opportunity to, if somebody, we did build a hangar and somebody left, we have the opportunity and it would help us out with our habitat conservation plan. To sort of rewild that parcel of property, take the building out and return it to prairie habitat. Yeah.
And if we could take a step back, I do wanna, there might be some other questions, but something that we heard a lot about on the environmental side was the concerns about the lead. And I just wanna kind of just talk about that a little bit. So the aviation industry back in, was it 2019 they approved e-fuel?
No, 2022 is when the FAA approved it, but it's actually been, the fuel was actually manufactured and put to the FAA for approval in 2014, so it's been a 10-year effort.
So
We're talking about unleaded aviation fuel.
Yeah, so in 2022, the FAA finally approved actually more than one unleaded option for the aircraft. And just to clarify, jet fuel that powers jet aircraft and turboprops does not have lead in it. Lead is found in what's called 100 LL avgas, and the LL stands for low lead. That's what powers your piston-powered single and light twin engine piston-powered airplanes that use engines similar to how like a car engine works. And so they did approve those in 2022. There is a process, obviously, to bring those new fuels to market. The port is very carefully watching that progress so that we can embrace unleaded fuel as soon as it becomes readily available and is safe to bring here. And so I just wanted to bring that up. And then on the topic of lead, just I'm not sure if this will lighten people's concerns or not, but a lot of the feedback we were getting is, haven't you heard about the lead issue at Hillsborough Airport? And so I actually, and this is available online, so you don't have to take my word for it, but the Hillsborough Airport, Port of Portland, who operates the Hillsborough Airport, did a lead study back in 2016, so it's not that old. And they did a study on the lead impacts on and around the airport. And it's worth reading because essentially what they found is they did not find lead above the state of Oregon's, because it's Oregon, the state of Oregon's permissible lead levels. Again, any lead is obviously bad for our health, but for what their state environmental agency put as a standard on and around the airport, it was below that level. And to put it in perspective, Hillsborough Airport has about just under 300 based airplanes at their airport. We currently have about 124. They do about 200,000 operations a year, which is a landing or a takeoff. We currently for 2024 did just under 64,000. So just to let you know, there's significantly less aircraft operations here, and yet by almost 25% of what Hillsborough Airport does, and we have a third of the based aircraft. So our lead levels, based on those assumptions, would be significantly less than them, and theirs were under the acceptable threshold set by the state. So again, not saying lead is good or bad. I'm just saying there was a lot of people that were concerned, like they were making comments about lead falling from the sky and comments like that kind of stirs fear. And I just thought it was worth sharing that with you to kind of give you a proportionate kind of visual of what's happening at our airport versus an airport that's much busier and is still well below, I shouldn't say well below, I'm not sure how much below, but it's still below the threshold. So anyways, again, if you go to the Port of Portland website, you can find that study and you can read it. And it's also interesting because it talks about the other contributors to lead poisoning in children that having to do with, water sources and makeups and baby foods and different home remedies where they use different roots and stuff to have it. And so it makes it a really complicated process to try to really evaluate the airport specific lead introduction into that community because of so many other variables. So I just kind of wanted to share that because that was a repeating topic that came up quite a bit.
Can I just make a quick comment? There are also a couple other airports that have found different.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. I just brought up Hillsborough because that was the one that was being brought up to us. So that's why I brought that up.
Here and also just looking here, I think where is this? Dane County?
Okay.
I think it's in,
Appreciate that. Yeah, but again, we are trying to be on top of it as soon as unleaded gas is available for us to commercially sell.
I just want to recognize the scheduled time was to 7, but we still have 7 questions left. However we want to go about this.
And how many are those?
There's 3 more questions in the room and there's 4 more online.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Where are we online versus?
So we actually are online right now.
Okay.
That's the next question.
Okay, why don't we do that and then
Let's just respect time. Get it.
temperature. Yeah.
Exactly.
I'll make
So
sure
online,
answers.
online if they have a question.
Okay, this is Lee Reiner. I've asked to unmute.
I wanted to thank Chris Tony tonight for speaking about the airport master plan. Many of us have looked at the airport master plan here in Tumwater, and many of us feel that as airport expansion, this is not just an airport master plan, it's an airport expansion. And that's why so many people are concerned about this, especially since the drinking water for the city of Tumwater is near this Olympia Airport. I think this conversation about fuel and leaded fuel and, oh yeah, it hasn't been approved yet. We haven't really gotten unleaded fuel to Olympia Airport, but when it comes, we'll get it. We're very hopeful that things will change, but they haven't changed. We don't have electric aircraft. We don't have unleaded fuel. We have contaminants that are going into an aquifer that feed the entire city of Tumwater. We have thousands of people that are going to be affected by perhaps the chemical retardants from de-icing some
Ms.
of
Ry-
these planes
Ms. Reiner?
potentially.
So Reiner, I'm gonna ask, do you have a question? You're making some statements that
Yeah.
aren't actual, and I would like to make sure that we.
Okay, so my question is, why have not you conducted an environmental impact statement for this master plan?
All right, well, based on the fact that this is a plan, it is conceptual in nature. We don't have really the detail that would be needed to do an adequate environmental impact statement. We're not required to by law at this time either, but we take these concerns seriously, and we know that at some point in the future, certainly before commercial service would ever be approved, we will have to go through the NEPA process and do a more robust environmental analysis, which will include air quality, noise, water, critical aquifer recharge area assessment, and all of the environmental elements that people have been concerned about. So we don't have the specificity right now to really do an in-depth analysis based on the fact that this is conceptual. But that will be forthcoming depending on the sequence of development at the airport and when these things come up for proposals.
Well, with the airport master plan, basically many of us see as an expansion, and yet you do not have the resources, you say, to conduct an environmental impact statement. We don't understand this. You want to expand the airport activities. Currently, you have 63,000 operations a year, and you don't have the money to fully go into an environmental impact statement. This does not make sense to many of us.
Well, I guess I'll just say it's not a question of money. It's a question of what is there enough sort of what's the word I'm looking for?
Nexus?
No, it's shoot, no. SEPA really requires you to do that, like an EIS or an in-depth analysis if an action is essentially likely. If you know it's probable, that's the word I was looking for. Woo, that was rough. If an action is probable, and as we've talked about, this is all conceptual. If there's a chance none of what is in this airport master plan will be built out. I'd like to think that we're gonna do things like, repave runways that now potentially need to be repaved for safety reasons, but there's a chance that none of this will happen. And so if we were to do an environmental impact statement right now, it would be purely speculative. And we don't even know if we do get commercial service again off in the future, like what size planes would they be? We don't know any of the kind of stuff to really do an effective analysis and give people the accurate information about what the environmental impacts would be. So again, it's not a money issue. It's essentially a timing issue. And when we do, or if we do get down the road to where there's more concrete actions that we know are going to happen, then absolutely we'll be doing that kind of an environmental analysis.
Well, it's an expansion, but you're still not doing an environmental impact statement. And therefore, many of us, our trust has been lost in this process. Thank you.
And I appreciate that, and I feel bad that this has caused a loss of trust, but I think we've been trying to be super clear tonight that nothing will be expanded. The physical footprint won't be expanded. There could be some increased operations, but then no commercial service will happen until there's a whole lot more process that the public will be involved in. So
I do want to make one clarification. Director Smith said, like, in cases of a runway repaving, that probably wasn't the best example.
Sorry.
And I bring that up because next month you'll see at a commission meeting that we're going to be bringing a runway rehabilitation repair before the commission. It is to repair a section of runway. It is not strengthening the runway. It is not making it longer. It is a repair and increasing and replacing lights with LED lighting. But again, that is separate from expansion or from, and that'll go through that. That's been through the environmental process. I just want to clarify.
I'll take my foot out of my mouth. That's great. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Amy.
Oh, great. Hi.
Amy, do you mind for audio purposes for everyone online?
Sorry, thank you.
Thanks for staying late. Thanks for doing this. I was at a meeting around the estuary last night, and it was, the topic was pollution and really all the work that is happening to return the or to return the watershed, to undo the work we've done. And we are in a place, you know, we know this with the climate, politically, regulation is out the window. And with the climate, we have to be planning for future generations, not 10 years, but like way down the road. So I just urge y'all, the commission, to really be looking not at next 10 years, but future generations, because here we are undoing the work of the folks who didn't consider that we're looking at growth and development and not looking at larger implications. So I was under the impression, I've been under the impression since maybe since the 2022, when this was going around, that that the port received monies from a grant, federal grant, something, I don't know, I don't have the facts, that you are actually required to fortify the runway, to expand the ability of the airport to take in air traffic. This is a session where you're telling us truth from fiction. So my question is, can you tell me, please, what monies you have received and what commitments you've made up till now? Yeah, thank you.
In the last 20 years, the only grant funds that we've received for the airport are for minor repairs to the airport. And this is in the last 20 years, minor repairs. In 2023 or 2024 is when we did was that a repair or was that a 700-foot extension?
Yep, it was a threshold relocation.
Threshold relocation. So, so that was the last major project. Since that project in 2023, 2024, it's been mostly just like crack seal and slurry and striping type of repairs. To the best of my knowledge, I just reviewed this. I could be forgetting something. Most recently was the grant for the master plan. We received a 100% grant from, and then we also received a grant last year for electric vehicles from the FAA under a separate pool of money to bring 2 electric vehicles to swap out to add to our fleet to.
So there wasn't money received that requires you to repave and expand the runway?
Not to expand the runway, we are required to maintain the infrastructure that we have that the FAA has paid for. So we're required to continue to do projects to maintain those pavements.
Okay, I heard you say that. Okay. Can you tell me what the point is of this master plan update if there's not if you're not actually seeking growth, if you're like, what is the whole point of all of this, of the update, of just like the conversation? Thank you.
It's twofold. One, I would say that so the FAA requires us to do a master plan update or a new master plan total every 7 to 10 years. So this was actually at the direction of the Federal Aviation Administration. Our last master plan was in 2013. And so at the direction of the FAA, they decided it had been long enough and they wanted us to do another one. So we started the new master plan in 2021. But the other thing is to look at feasibility of the airport. What we can do with it, because we want to make sure that there's a balance, right? There's a balance between environmental concerns and a balance between being financially self-sufficient. Yeah, I don't quote me on this, but somewhere in the 90s, more than 90% of the general aviation airports across the country are not financially self-sufficient, which means they rely on taxpayer dollars in order to stay open. Thankfully for the Port of Olympia, our airport, because of the extra industrial land that's part of the port lands, we can say we don't rely on taxpayer dollars to operate. But we want to make sure that we are financially responsible as far as making sure we provide for opportunities for that growth within reason and balancing the environmental concerns. But it is an airport. There's an obligation to let the airport serve to the best of its ability to the community, balancing those other concerns.
And right now, we have overbalanced finances and underbalanced the climate, which is why we're at the place where we're at. And I would hope that the balance would not be that
That the port will start overbalancing, overcompensating for the harms that we have up to now collectively formed.
Appreciate that.
That's an important part of what we do in terms of everything going forward in terms of, that's why you see, I mean, operations, airport, environmental, we're tied at the hip. I mean, and everything that we do, right to our mission and vision statements here at the port is to go ahead and bring, positive value to the community, but doing so in an environmentally sustainable way. To add to Chris's comments about, the whole point of the airport master plan update is part of it is to take a look at, hey, we saw 10 years ago what the traffic forecasts were. What does it look like now going forward? And what we saw actually is that we haven't met the forecast growth, that was predicted 10 years ago. So we're growing at a slower rate, but it also affirms then that we're still going in the right direction in terms of planning for the resource. The other key component though, that really is as we learn more in the industry about how to improve the safety of our facilities and our capability and our operational ability to address the industry's needs, airport design standards change. And a big part of this airport master plan update is to look at, okay, what design standards have changed on airports over the last 10 years? Where does the Port of Olympia's facilities comply with those standards, and what changes need to be made to get into compliance? And a big part of what you see on that diagram is to get our taxiways and some of our other facilities into compliance with the current design standards so that we have the safest, most effective airport that we possibly can.
We'll take one online and then Rhonda, you'll be next.
This is Jan Witt that I'm asking to come here.
Hi, Jan.
Hi, can you hear me?
You can.
I have a couple of remarks. One is the survey that you showed of the visioning, 2019 visioning, indicated that 29 people had wanted to have a feasibility study regarding commercial aviation. And my understanding is that 250 people have expressed concerns in writing in comments to the port about this plan. And you're hearing a lot of people express concerns about commercial aviation. So it seems unbalanced that a whole feasibility study was based on the input from 29 people when hundreds of people are saying that they're very concerned about this. The second thing is that I'm concerned that the port seems to be undermining community concerns about what could be happening with this airport master plan. I don't know of anybody who's been saying that the Olympia Airport is going to be a hub. The concern, according to the feasibility study, is that it could become a satellite service to a number of hubs, such as LAX, and that would have tremendous impacts. The planes that would be used are planes like the Bombardier Q400, which have garnered many complaints and lawsuits because of the noise impacts. So I think that it's really important that we be realistic about the huge impacts that we acknowledge could happen at this airport, and that the feasibility study acknowledges, and that the airport layout plan is planning for, including that 40,000 square foot new airline terminal. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that
Ms. Witt, I apologize. For the sake of time, there's other people that have questions. Would you mind? We see you regularly. I could be happy to talk to you via phone or in person, but if you have a question, I'm happy to answer the question.
I do have a question. You keep referring to the commercial aviation findings of the Commercial Aviation Commission findings. That commission was disbanded well over a year ago and replaced with another aviation planning group that is actually looking for existing airports that could help accommodate CTAC overflow. According to the feasibility study, the Olympia Airport, if plans are as follows, could be taking 15% of CTAC's current flights to hub airports. So to say that the Olympia Airport isn't planned to be taking overflow from CTAC is really not accurate. And I'm wondering why you keep quoting the Commercial Aviation Committee findings when there's this new group that is completely working now and is looking at the Olympia Airport? It
So-
seems like you're putting out a welcome sign for this group to identify the Olympia Airport as a place that could be taking commercial aircraft.
We addressed the Commercial Aviation Coordination Commission because there was residual just concern from the community from back when this first was being discussed as far back as 2019, and then when our master plan started in 2021. And so the concern about that has came up again during this last 30-day comment period, and that's why we discussed it again this evening to try to clarify that. You are right, that commission was finished. It was disbanded because their purpose was fulfilled. And as we shared earlier, the Port of Olympia, the City of Olympia, the City of Tumwater, and the surrounding communities have made it very clear they were not interested in supporting that. And that's not going to change with this new commission that they've more recently have established.
Right, but the new commission is not looking at whether or not a county is going to sponsor the airport. A lot of the CAC membership said that they didn't think that the Olympia Airport should have even been taken off of the list of potential airports just because local people didn't want it.
Ms. Witt, what I'm saying
isn't considering that.
Ms. Witt, what I'm saying is without local support, that we would not take on that task from that commission. So we are not going to become a reliever airport for SeaTac because our local leadership does not support that. So it's not an option. So the state can create a commission, and that commission can do their research and make recommendations. But that's not going to result in anything that's going to force our local jurisdictions to do something.
But even the feasibility study says that the Olympia Regional Airport can eventually take on 15% of SeaTac's capacity to one of these airports, growing this activity throughout the forecast period. That's from the feasibility study.
You are correct. And what you need to realize is that is a feasibility study. It's what's potentially feasible with our infrastructure. It does not mean that that's our goal. It does not mean that we're taking steps towards that. It is simply a feasibility study to determine what is and is not feasible.
But you've taken information from that study and put it into an airport layout plan that is exactly what the feasibility study is recommending. So
Again,
it seems to me that what you should do is redo the master plan update and take that out of the plan if it's not what you intend to do.
again, for the sake of time, Ms. Witt, I'd be more than happy to meet with you one-on-one. That is not in the airport layout plan. Our airport layout plan shows potential commercial air service area on the airfield. There's a difference between designating a portion of the airfield for potential limited commercial service and becoming a hub for reliever aircraft for SeaTac customers.
We're not talking about a hub. We're talking about we're talking about becoming a satellite service, which would have huge devastating impacts on this community. It would be not 747s, it would be Bombardiers, and it would be other 100 passenger aircraft flying directly over populated areas.
Ms. Witt, I would, for the sake of time, we'll have to move on, but I would ask you to reread Appendix 4-1 and read that in context when it talks about what it's actually suggesting and what's considered the most likely feasible. There is actually a diagram and a section in 4-1, and if you email me, I'll get back to you with that specific section of the appendix. But it actually, after listing all the feasible options for the airport, it then shares what the preferred feasible option is, and it talks about and addresses your concerns. Again, I can get that information too if you send me an email, but
I do also want to address one item, just, again, a fact check. The difference, there's a huge difference in the scope between the original Commercial Aviation Coordinating Commission, which did sunset in June 2023, and the newly created Commercial Aviation Work Group, as it's known, is the commission that no longer exists, charged with the responsibility of identifying a new airport site to the legislature. That was the direct location requirement. So the requirement that exists, Governor Inslee vetoed 4 of the 8 sections of the bill that created the Commercial Aviation Work Group that is currently taking a look, and its only function is to go ahead and analyze traffic and capacity and make a report to the legislature. It has no responsibility and no direction at all to provide any particular recommendations with regard to any airport whatsoever.
Particularly no authority.
Well, I see we're losing people and we're at 7:30, so we've gone about half an hour past what we initially thought we were gonna be doing tonight. So how about we take one more question? Is that?
So we'll go with Rhonda, she's next anyways, and then the two folks online, if you wouldn't mind, just writing a question and we can get back to
And
them.
we will get back to you. Yeah.
We will make sure Chris gets that to answer you directly. Rhonda.
Yeah, thanks so much for staying over. Rhonda Larson Kramer. So if this is accommodating growth of like 1% per year, the plan is created to accommodate that 1% per year, and it's a 20-year timeline. And so that's based on the predictions. Then doesn't that mean that everything in the plan is going to happen in 20 years?
No, I'm forecast, we don't know what's gonna happen in 20 years. I think I'm misunderstanding your question, sorry.
If the plan is made to have an increase to accommodate air traffic predictions, that's what the entire, you're saying that's what the entire reason is for this plan, right?
Not the entire, we also, as Warren and I both have mentioned, we also need to make sure that we're meeting current design standards for runways and taxiways and signs for the FAA. And so there's new standards for taxiways and runways that realigning them, shifting them.
Okay, that's understandable. So what I'm talking about is all the additional buildings and stuff like that, right? That's for the 1% per year, you know, incremental increase. We're predicting we're predicting what the traffic's gonna be in the future. And that's what this plan is to do, right?
You're talking about like if we build it, they will come kind of.
No.
Warren, think you can. Warren.
Well, I appreciate the question. I also appreciate, you brought this issue before the commission in the public comment section this past Monday night. And I picked up on the fact that just because it's in the plan means we have to make it happen. And that's the key piece that I think you're asking is if it's written in the master plan, does that mean we are going to do what's in the master plan in 20 years?
No. Thank you for asking.
Yes.
Clarify. It's what I'm saying is the plan is based on your predictions. That's what I'm hearing tonight.
Not our predictions, the FAA's predictions.
Somebody's predictions, I guess, right? It's based on predictions of growth, right? So that means the prediction is that in 20 years, the things that are in the plan will happen. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm saying the prediction is, that's how it's made. It's made to accommodate the predicted growth.
Right. And I get where you're coming, and here's where the difference lies, is we see about a 1% growth in traffic, each year over through 2040. The thing is, we don't know exactly, we have an idea on how that traffic is going to increase, but is it going to be more flight training, small piston engine aircraft? Is it going to be corporate jet? Will it be commercial? It could be any number of those things or smaller pieces of those in increments. Will all of it happen that result in everything that's in orange and peach on that screen be done? No, absolutely. It depends upon what specific demand it is. And then we will focus on meeting that demand in the areas and sectors of the airport that we have set aside to meet it. But that doesn't mean we're going to build it all out. It just means that if we have small general aviation increases, to meet that 1% a year as currently forecast, well, that would be to the southeast side of the airport or the very northeast corner. If it's along corporate jets, it would be to the southwest corner. If it's commercial, it would be to the west side. Doesn't mean it's all going to happen, but it depends that, okay, if the growth is in this area, here's how we're going to meet it. If the growth is over in this area, I don't have any vestiges at all on, especially on where we've been at this airport in the last 25 years, that will come to anywhere close to doing everything that's on that airport master plan.
And I will say, as Chris pointed out, previous projections have been big overestimates. So we predicted we'll get up to 70,000 and we're at 63. So
as
the
part of-
predictions aren't always accurate.
Part of the master planning process, we're supposed to look at our airport and look at what conceptually is possible, and that's what you're seeing on the screen. It does not mean, to your point, it does not mean that that's likely what's going to happen in the next 20 years. I'd bet more than $5 that you're not going to see all of that developed in 20 years. So.
Hopefully you'll win.
$5 whole.
He said more than.
I'm I said more, thank you. Thank you for acknowledging that. I was trying to be, you know.
Thanks for coming to rest. I leave these guys to say as well, but just really appreciate people coming out. We really do want to have conversations about this, and definitely we're hearing you about the concerns about commercial aircraft and about the impacts to the neighborhoods and to your lives. So we very much appreciate everybody coming out and talking with us about it.
And do we want to take those last two and just?
Let's just have them right in.
Right in?
Yeah, I
Okay.
feel like we're got off.
Time?
Yeah.
7:00.
Yeah, so.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.